everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Interview with Scientist series. Today we have Dr. Victoria Sherwood from United Kingdom joining us. Victoria, aka Vicky, was a principal investigator in UK and had a skin cancer research lab. She changed her career and entered medical writing. She now writes clinical content for the life science industry and would soon be starting as an expert scientific writer at Novartis. She is also the founder of BiomedBadass, a blog focused on career development to support STEM researchers. Through her blog and YouTube channel, she aims to support and inspire other academics looking to make a similar move towards a career in the industry. Today, we will talk with Vicky about her transition to industry as a medical writer, career advice, and how to secure a position in the industry, and lastly, about her blog, BiomedBadass. Thank you, Vicky, for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for the invite.
Our pleasure. So let us start by asking you, can you tell us more about your research and the research lab you had?
All right. Yes. So I was researching skin cancer, specifically aggressive skin cancers, ones that metastasize and spread. And we were looking at understanding the fundamental biology of why those cells spread. So we were predominantly looking at melanoma, which is a very aggressive skin cancer, but also squamous cell carcinoma as well, which once it metastasizes has a pretty similar fatality rate to melanoma, albeit it's a little less common at metastasizing. So we were looking at both of those tumor types. I was working at the University of Dundee, where they had a lot of skin research going on at the medical school. And we were trying to, as I said, understand the fundamental biology, but also trying to take that and use it a little bit in a translational context, and try and see if we could use that understanding to develop new therapeutics or ideas for new therapeutics. So we were kind of, I would say we were basic biology, but we had a translational twist to some of the work we were doing, is how I would describe it. But it wasn't anywhere near where we were producing a product or we're ready to spin anything out. You know, it was a lot more basic than that.
Okay. So when and why did you decide to move out of your research and research lab?
And out of academia generally. Oh, this is a bit of a long-winded story, but let me take you right back to the beginning. I've actually transitioned out of academia twice.
Okay.
The first time was as an undergrad. The first job I took was at a medical device company, where we were producing inhalers for different pharma companies and different products. And I ended up working on a project, it was quite exciting at the time, which was developing an inhaled form of insulin. And we were working with Pfizer to develop that. Since I left the medical device company, the product was actually pulled because it had contraindication in the lung. So the project actually didn't go anywhere, but we were developing a new inhaled form of insulin for diabetic patients. So they wouldn't have to inject, basically. So it's quite cool. And I think there are new formulations of inhaled insulin now that are presumably safer, hopefully. And so those products might be coming online, or maybe online in some markets. I'm not sure. I haven't been following the therapeutic area that lot for more recently. But at the time, I realized that a lot of the scientists who were working there, the senior scientists, all had postgraduate education, and I had a bachelor's degree. So I figured that if I wanted to climb in a company like the one I was working in, I should really think about going back to university and getting a postgraduate education. So that's exactly what I did. I went and did a PhD at the University of Nottingham, which is one of the largest universities in the UK, right in the centre of England. The furthest point you can be away from the coast. And I love surfing and anything to do with the coast. So I was miles away from where I wanted to be in terms of, geographical location, but the university was great and I learned a lot, and I enjoyed my PhD in the end. It was tough. I had a little bit of a hands-off supervisor, I guess you would say, but we got on very well. It was just that I kind of had to figure out a lot myself. And I think that was actually, in a way, a very good thing, because I got the training that, you know, of being self-sufficient and resilient through that
Yes.
process. And I've carried that with me ever since. So from that respect, I will forever be grateful to that experience. And I did what a lot of PhD students do, I think, was I really didn't think about what next until right at the end of my PhD. And so I was frantically, because the PhD hadn't gone brilliantly, in the last year I was trying to gather all the data, and we have very short PhDs in the UK. At the time I only had 3 years funding, so whilst I was writing my thesis, I was working in a hotel, trying to pay the rent and write the thesis at the same time. So it was all a bit of a pressure. So I was scrabbling around to get all the last data together for the thesis. And I really didn't think about that next step or going back to industry or what I was going to do. So I got to the point where I'd submitted the thesis and I thought, I just need a job. So I took a postdoc. I applied to postdoc because it's probably the easiest thing to do. And my supervisor, you know, had contacts. And so I just ended up doing a postdoc down at the University of Bath. And it was actually a developmental biology postdoc. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I thought, this is it. I'm never going back to industry. My original path is now, that's it, I'm done. I love the research I'm doing and I'm going to stay in academia. And that's what I did. And I ended up becoming a PI. I went abroad. I went to Seattle for a bit, just like on a sabbatical for like just under a year. And I went across to Sweden as well. So I did a bit of traveling, which is also great when you're a postdoc. You get to see the world and go to different places, which is fantastic. And then I returned to the UK and set up my lab in 2011. And yes, so, you know, from that respect, it was quite exciting. You know, I was setting up my lab. This was going to be my career for life, but it was right on the back end, really, of the economic downturn from the Great Recession of 2009. So there wasn't a lot of money hanging around in the public purse. And I was finding I was having to write an awful lot of grants. And what I noticed was that senior academics in the departments that I was working in were also really struggling to get money in. And these were people who traditionally had plenty of money throughout their career. So I started to think, you know, this is not going to get any better potentially. And do I want to be writing all these grants until my retirement, which is in, you know, a number of decades, right, at this point. So I was like, you know, I've got that choice, or I could think about if there were any other options. And so this went on. I must have been in this kind of state for at least, I'd say, 2 years. You know, and I had the luxury, right, because I had a permanent job, so I had the luxury of trying to think about whether or not I should stay or whether I should go. And I realized a lot of people on temporary contracts don't have that luxury. You know, they have to make a decision more quickly. So I think that led to a large degree of procrastination on my part, that I was saying to myself, well, I can't go. You know, I've spent all this time setting this up. I have people in the lab, they depend on me. And I talked myself out of it a lot of the time. But I actually don't think, if I'd sat and actually thought about academia as a career, I don't think it was actually a good fit for me, for a number of reasons. I like my work to have an impact. I like it to have meaning. I like the time that I spend and I put into it to be as fruitful as it can be with the time that I have. And I feel like in academia, a lot can be down to luck. You know, you can have experiments that, you know, just work, right? And you came across an amazing idea, or you serendipitously found something, right? We all know the story of penicillin. So, you know, I think, you know, for that whole concept started to grate with me. And so, you know, I was starting to think, is there other things where my time can be used more efficiently with higher impact? And the question, the answer to that was obviously yes, as I started to do a little bit of investigation. But I faced quite a lot of barriers. And those barriers were that I'd been in academia for such a long time that I hadn't really built a non-academic network. My entire network was academic. I hang around with academics. My social peers were academics. Everything in my life pretty much other people were academics. So I was really starting to well, having to start at a base level and reach out to people when I was quite, at a quite senior level.
Yes.
So, I think people thought that was a little bit odd as to why I would want to leave and why I would be talking about this. And I had that conversation of, are you sure about this? Are you making the right decision? I had it over and over and over again, and it became quite exhausting, really. But at some point, I reached the point where, no, I'm definitely going to leave. And then I had to get serious about what it was I was going to do. And obviously, from my research background, it was quite a natural thing for me. And also, actually, my experience working in medical devices, it was quite a natural thing for me to think about the pharma industry or therapeutic industry more generally. So biotech or medical devices. So I started to investigate those. And the other barrier I had was that obviously the most logical thing you can do as a researcher is move into R&D, right? But I really didn't want to do that. For really, the main reason was that I was so used to like driving the research myself. I was worried that I would not be able to do that so much in a commercial setting. And I thought that transition for me would be rather difficult. And also, I think getting back to this whole impact thing, I was worried as well that it would be very similar in an R&D setting. I had lots of colleagues who'd gone down the industry route, gone into R&D, and they worked on projects that just get axed, or whole departments get axed and they have to find new jobs. And I just felt like I didn't need any more of that in my life. I'd done that. I was ready for something else. And so that was one of my main criteria of my transition. I wanted like a growing industry, or an area where there was a huge demand on the expertise. So that was part of the research that I set out to do. And so what I did was I did a lot of informational interviews. So I talk about this quite a bit on my blog and networking, because I think, there's a little bit of people don't want to really network. And to be honest with you, I can understand where they're coming from. I'm not a natural extrovert. But I think there's a way you can do it, and you can network in a way that works for you. And I think everybody can do it effectively. So I just started to reach out to people and ask what sort of jobs they were doing in pharma. I mean, LinkedIn was my huge friend here because I could find people quite easily. And I was quite surprised, actually, and pleasantly surprised to find that most people were willing to give me 10, 15 minutes, half an hour sometimes to talk about what they were doing and where they come from. And I specifically looked for people that had similar educational background to myself. So I could see, what their path was, and also learn more about their trajectory. And through that, I learned more about medical affairs. I considered a role as a possible MSL, but then decided that probably wouldn't be right for me. And I stumbled across medical writing, medical communications. Which we've spoken about before. So that was kind of the industry I wanted to get into. And through that networking and those informational interviews, I started to get connected with people who could really, I call them decision makers, people that could really move the needle for where I wanted to get to. And it was through that work really that I made the transition. That's how I did it. So yeah, I hope that was a very long-winded way of answering your question, but I hope you can see I have made the transition twice, once as an undergrad and again as a PI. I have moved from academia to industry.
That was a really motivating story for me, at least. So that brings to my next question. Do you miss academic research by any chance?
Oh, yes, I do. I would be lying to say that I don't, and I still check the field. So I was interested in Wnt signaling, specifically in the skin, and as I said, in metastatic tumors. And so I still check those out. I still have an alert. And I still look on PubMed to see where the field is going. It was always a natural interest for me. It was a passion. So yeah, I mean, I would be lying to say that I don't miss aspects of it. I certainly do. But the system in which I was working was not the right one for me. And I found, and I guess at the time I didn't realize this, but since coming out and working in the pharma sector, I realized there's a huge amount of resources outside of academia, and I didn't realize how limited the resources actually were within the system. And I think I found that for myself, and I, you know, I'm not anti-academia at all. And I, you know, I'm really positively encouraging people, if they want an academic career, I think they should consider it, even though it is highly competitive. But it just was not right for me, you know, that high level of sustained competition for me, and ploughing everything into grant writing and trying to get money, for me just was not something I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing, basically.
Okay.
So I don't miss that aspect, but the actual research, yes, I do miss. I do miss. But I would say, as a medical writer, one of the really coolest things about the job is when you're working in a particular therapeutic area, particularly if it's a fast-moving area. So the first job I transitioned into was an oncology-based writing job, because I was able to leverage my expertise and my knowledge in tumor biology and the oncology area generally to be able to make that transition. So in that area, we were working in immuno-oncology. So it's a huge, fast-moving paced sector, and some of the data coming off, you know, we were the first teams to see that exciting clinical data, so we knew what impact that was going to have for patients. So so that kind of fulfilled the same excitement for scientific research that I had as an academic. It kind of plugged the gap. So so whilst I wasn't doing the research myself, I was still able to see the impact of the work we were doing, and that was really exciting. So in some angles, I do miss the basic biology, but in other angles,
you don't.
I don't miss the system. I don't miss the system, I can say.
Good. I know we all have suffered from in the system at some point.
Yeah.
So for our audience who are new, who are doing PhD or postdocs, or who are just master or bachelor students, is it very important to have a PhD to enter into pharmaceutical industry?
No, not into the pharma industry. If you want to get into R&D, and work your way up to be a senior scientist, and run a lab and be a specialist, then yes, you know, you would need a PhD. I mean, I can only comment really in the area that I work in. In medical communications generally, they like to hire PhDs because we have the right skill set to go away and figure stuff out. But that doesn't mean you absolutely need a PhD to be a medical writer. And in fact, my first boss, when I made the transition, she did not have a PhD, and she was one of the best medical writers I've ever worked with. So, you know, it's not an absolute prerequisite, but it can help. There are other positions where, again, it's desirable. So MSL, they like you to have a doctorate position, or at least, if not, I guess, a Master of Pharmacy, an MPharm degree is quite desirable. So I think postgraduate education is desirable, certainly, but it's not an absolute prerequisite, I would say, certainly for some jobs.
Okay. So what are your suggestions for someone who wants to enter as a medical writer? How should he or she start?
Right, yes. So I guess you have the basic skills. So if somebody's a PhD, for example, you have the skills needed to be a successful medical writer. You can go away and do the research. You're pretty self-sufficient. You're resilient. But it can be competitive, that first step, you know, breaking into the industry. And so if you can diversify or show diversity in your writing skills within your CV, that helps. So, you know, blog posts, guest posts on blogs, editing journals, anything like that. But even beyond writing, so things like if you've organized a conference, I mean, that's part of medical communications. It might well be part of your job. Depending on what type of medical writing role you go for. And I can talk a little bit more about different types of medical writing if you'd like, for the audience.
Definitely.
But so generally, you know, I organized our departmental annual seminar, and I did it for, I think it was 4-5 years in total. And And so I put that on there, so I'd shown that I'd done conference work and so anything extra that can add those kind of translational skills, if you like,
Yeah.
Communication skills generally as well, your ability to work in a team, anything that shows that, really try and emphasize that in your CV.
Okay.
And then on a practical level, things that I use on a daily basis that are really helpful are, well, we use Word obviously in the Microsoft
Yes.
Office suite, but if you can use the shortcuts on PowerPoint, that will increase the speed of your writing and the ability for you to produce documents faster if you're producing slide decks, for example. So knowing those kind of links and just using your time in the lab to work out, what the shortcuts are, what additional features PowerPoint has, because in academia we're not really that fussed about making things look super beautiful or great. We just want to get the data across clearly and effectively. But in industry it's a little bit different. They want to get the data across clearly and effectively, but they also want it to look very professional. So working on maybe thinking about the creativity in the slides and adding a little professional edge, and getting used to looking at commercial slide decks that are used in the commercial setting. So a slide deck just in industry just refers to a PowerPoint presentation. There's nothing different, but a slide deck, when we talk about slide deck, it means it looks slightly different to the kind of presentations we would be used to seeing in academia. And so just Googling those and having a look at those, that can help as well, because then you understand a little bit more about what's required. And I would also say the same for Excel. So understanding how to use a pivot table, the shortcuts on Excel, how to link things, all those sorts of things can help as well. So on a practical level, those things can get you going faster when you're in the job. If you can work faster, it's really all about timing and deadlines in this industry. It's a service industry, and it's about delivering as much quality content as you can in as short a period of time as possible. That's what makes you excel.
So what are some of the key points that one should keep in mind while working in industry to be successful?
So again, I said, time is money in industry. It's a completely different setup. Deadlines are key, and they are not flexible. So when I was an academic, I was on panels, departmental panels, and we'd have them every 3 to 6 months, depending on whether people were available or there was a summer break or whatever. And the same agenda would be every single panel. We would have exactly the same things, and nothing had been done, right? That doesn't happen in industry. When you have a meeting in industry and people meet and there's a series of objectives, those objectives are met within the next few days, or they are implemented. It is an instant thing. There's no procrastination. There is no, you just get on with it, right? It's about being efficient and driving efficiency within the system. And so that's something you kind of have to get used to. There's not, you go to a meeting, these are the objectives, there's no time to go away and have a cup of tea and think about them. You get back to your computer and you start implementing. It's like that kind of mindset. And also you will be managed in industry in a way that you're not used to in academia. So in academia, the management style that you get is very hit and miss, right? It depends on your supervisor, your PI, how they are, who they are as a person, and the kind of management style that they've been used to before. And so we all have different experiences. And when we move labs, we've all been exposed to different levels of management. In industry, I would say there are bad managers, there are very good managers, but what the managers have is a training, a basic training. So your career and basically your general day-to-day work will be managed professionally, I would say, at least on some level. Now, there will be better managers, there will be poorer managers within that system, but generally you will be professionally managed, including your career, which is not something that happens in academia. So that's different, certainly. And I think the culture as well, getting to grips with the culture of the company in which you find yourself, and learning how to navigate that will definitely help you adjust and also thrive within that system. So So when I refer to the culture, I mean things like being able, thinking about this project management and deadlines, and also learning about who the key players are, who you should be talking to. I mean, this is also true of academia to many degrees, certainly within the faculty levels, but within industry, your career is really something that you should be managing. It's not really down to your manager. You will have regular meetings, hopefully more than annually, but you will have an appraisal, and within that, you should be setting goals alongside your manager, and you should be asking for measurable, demonstrated things that you should achieve, and once you achieve them, it's like a tick list. And therefore after that you should be talking about the progression, so you can have a lot more input on where you're going. And also thinking about your career not just as a ladder like we have in academia, where you go, the typical apprenticeship route of academia, which is PhD, postdoc, associate professor, and blah blah blah. But also in industry, because particularly if you find yourself in a large company, we talk more about it being like a lattice. So you may use your speciality to get into the industry first of all, but then you might migrate into other areas. So you might get into marketing, or you might get into just general management, or you might want to go into HR. And those are all distinct possibilities once you're in industry. You don't necessarily have to stick to a defined career path. So that's very different. And that's an interesting thing to learn to navigate as somebody from academia, where you're just used to there being one choice, one route. There are multiple routes. Exactly. So that's my biggest advice to anybody going into industry. Really take control of your career, look around, and try and get a broad experience as you can. Outside your niche speciality, and try different things.
So that brings to the next question about your blog. How did you come up with the name? It's a very interesting name.
Well, it's not a very professional name, is it? I just, I was a biomedical researcher, and on the blog, I just give my frank experience of how I found the transition. But I also talk to other professionals as well, to try and inject more information and more experience. But generally, I just thought, if I needed a blog like that when I was making the transition. I needed somebody just to speak frankly and give me a little bit of badass advice, I guess, about how to navigate this huge, to me, was a huge move that I was thinking about doing at the time. And really there wasn't that much out there when I made the transition. When I was thinking about this 5 to 6 years ago, there wasn't as much out there as there is now, which is fantastic, because there's loads and loads of topics of discussion and different people talking about their experiences. And there's an awful lot of blogs, and the social media is flooded on these discussion topics now, which is fantastic. But at the time when I did it, it really didn't exist. So I think I set up the blog in 2018. Or really started regularly publishing on it. Just giving, my experience of how I made that transition, and more information about medical communications and the pharma sector, really.
So how do you choose your topic? How do you choose a topic for discussion or writing? And how do you create these videos for YouTube?
Well, initially, as I said, it started off just me wanting to help others. So people were reaching out to me. I was at the University of Dundee, and I had a few people reach out to me from there, students who working in other labs, asking me, about my transition and about generally medical communications. So my first few topics were a little bit more geared towards, their questions, if you like. But as it's gone on and it's kind of grown a bit more organically, other questions have come in, and really the audience is the inspiration. So I base the answers on my experience, because that's all I can give, or I reach out to others who I think might have a better perspective on a certain topic. but I
Okay.
try to answer the questions that come into me, essentially.
Okay.
So I often ask my audience for their input and what they would be interested in learning about, and then I try to meet their needs as much as I can. And it's completely the same ethos with the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is basically just the blog, but in a video format. Because I realize that some people prefer learning through video, right?
Yes.
Than having to sit and read, a whole spiel on the blog. So I figured that I could try and mix it up a bit and provide both video and written content for people.
Well, your blog and the YouTube channel is doing really great, and I really enjoy reading it and going through the videos.
Excellent.
So,
please subscribe to the channel.
Definitely do that. And we will share the link on our YouTube channel as well in the description. So we would like to thank you very much for your time today and sharing your journey from academic to industry, then back to academic, and then back to industry. So twice done. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure our audience will gain a lot of knowledge from your talk. And if you want to reach out to Vicky Sherwood, I will share the link to your Twitter and to your YouTube channel and to your blog in the description.
Brilliant. Perfect.
Thank
you so much again for the invite, and thanks for your time.
Pleasure.